everything, is upset without the media's doing wrong things. But then the televisions, etc., you can send a message to the persons concerned that here are the so many jobs, and it can be regulated through government agencies.
We do think that, thank you for that comment, we do think that that is the key, is a targeted media effort where the workers come from. And a targeted media effort that talks about the process in just a few seconds and how you have to beware from being exploited. We know that down in Kerala, we've seen commercials and ads for domestic workers, warning them what could happen to them if they go to the Gulf. But there's not really anything that, to my knowledge, that's been targeted toward laborers to warn them about the deceptive hiring and the consequences.
And the other thing, as you were saying, what we can do is, Sam won't be saying, I can tell on his behalf, is like, what he told me is, before we go out and tell other countries, what you're doing is wrong, you have to do this and that, let me start fix the problem in my country. And it's so hypocritical for me to go out and say, that's what he told me. And that's exactly what we're doing. And it is going places, as we're telling you, talking in Congress. Let's fix it there. So because Congress, they are all the UN and all the paper going out saying, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And I really admire him for that. And I think he wrote an report and submitted to Obama's administration. Let's see how that comes out, like what we can do and what the company should directly recruit, and how, if you come and recruit, how we can support them and all that thing. We are working on it, and it's very positive things, the way the paper is moving faster than in India. I'm so excited about it. He's so frustrated because it took a year. I said, no, it takes my lifetime. It's only a year. I can wait. That's what I told him.
Well,
so that's a good thing happening.
Please remember that we support you in all this.
Thank
but
you so
of course,
much.
we can only support you in prayer. What
Yes.
else we can do? We are powerless.
That's a lot. But you know, what Sindhu mentioned reminds me of a conference that we spoke at in 2007 in Washington, D.C. And the conference the title was How U.S. Government Contractors Can Mitigate Trafficking of Persons on Their Contracts Overseas. And people were getting up and talking about different measures. One of the large contractors said, we hire subcontractors, we don't hire laborers, so it's not our business. And we told what we were doing for this company, and one of the journalists in the audience said, we understand that this practice has been going on in the Gulf region for maybe hundreds of years. Do you really think you're going to change the culture in the Gulf? And I responded to him, I said, you know, we're not trying to change the culture in the Gulf region. What we're trying to do is create a subculture of compliance, company by company, that says it doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen here.
And we've been successful on that. A company which have 50,000 employees, they are following it. And I've been one of the employees once upon a time there. And we can make a difference company by company, and eventually maybe the culture.
How have you been successful in India? You are successful in US, but what about India?
That's what I told before. It's not getting anywhere here, so I'm coming from the side wind from US. I have no choice, because as telling, like, only even here today, we have few occurred who think and concern wanted to do something about it. And there are a bigger group who, so yeah, I'm pathetically positive on this, and hopefully we'll get there one day. Yeah, we will change.
Yes, sir. I think another question. Or
That's it.
any other questions or comments? Oh, in the back.
We can give our email address or anything. Even if you don't want to talk here, you can always write back or call us.
If you want to, we'll also send you a link to the congressional hearing where we testified, and also an article we wrote on how to investigate this and
Yeah,
prosecute
we can
it.
send that to you guys, and we can see how we are moving ahead.
Well, I thank you for your attention, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sindhu Kavinamannil is a certified fraud examiner. She's the founder and CEO at Compliance Consulting Services. She has lived in the for several years and has established and maintained corporate governance programs for multinational companies. She has conducted numerous corporate workshops in Kuwait and in Iraq related to allegations of trafficking in humans for labor, and is a frequent speaker and author on the subject. She addresses measures to assess, investigate, and prosecute labor trafficking, and she also serves as a consultant to the U.S. government on counter-trafficking measures and has provided training to U.S. law enforcement officers and auditors in measures to combat human trafficking. Mr. Sam McCahon is the founder of McCahon Law Offices in Washington. He has 22 years' experience in representing the government and contractors in investigating fraud and economic crimes. He has served as federal prosecutor in the U.S. Department of Justice and has 10 years' experience in living and working in the Gulf region, where he has drawn upon cultural and social variables to establish corporate governance programs for private and publicly traded multinational corporations. In addition, he is currently a consultant to the U.S. and foreign law enforcement agencies concerning measures to combat human trafficking with a focus on Middle East. So without further delay, I'd like to invite you two to start. It's a conversation between two eminent speakers.
Thank you so much, Sana. And also want to thank you for giving us this opportunity. Truly, abolishing this practice is a passion of ours. It's something we've been working on for about the last 6 years. Something we'll probably never fully realize accomplished because of the scope of this issue. But we have to try nonetheless, no matter how insignificant the impact may be in the general scheme of things. I'm very much looking forward to your questions that you have, and hopefully have a dialogue at the conclusion of presenting the information. I'm sure that labor trafficking isn't a novel concept to most of us here. It happens a lot. There is a definition that the United Nations has, as well as the U.S. Department of State, when they assess what constitutes trafficking persons. Most people think of sex trafficking when we talk about trafficking persons. But by definition, it also includes labor trafficking. And it occurs anytime when someone, either through economic or physical duress, is not free to leave the position in which they've been employed. The United Nations and Interpol rank trafficking in humans the third priority on growth as far as organized criminal activity. And it is the product of organized crime. It's very prominent worldwide. The number one offense committed by organized crime as far as scope is drug trafficking. Second, illegal arms. And then the next one is human trafficking. It's a very, very lucrative business, and there is very, very little likelihood of anyone being caught or prosecuted for this offense. So it makes it a prime target for organized criminal activity. India has been defined by the United Nations as a source, destination, and transit country for human trafficking. We were talking earlier a little bit about how people come from Nepal through India, sometimes to work here, sometimes they come legally, sometimes illegally. But they also traffic through here to be sent to the Gulf region, to work as domestic laborers, unfortunately sex trafficking as well. So India has a very prominent role it can play in abolishing the trafficking process. Has a number of good laws on the books, but I think there's probably not a lot of education among law enforcement about what constitutes trafficking, and to date there hasn't been a lot of activity as far as prosecuting trafficking. I want to talk a little bit about the process, the fraudulent recruitment process. It starts in the Gulf, which is where we're focusing for this purpose of this study. It starts with the contractor identifying labor needs that they have, usually unskilled, semi-skilled labor. Construction obviously is a huge draw, especially in United Arab Emirates and Qatar, to a lesser extent Kuwait. But after the contractor identifies the labor needs, then the contractor sets out to identify a recruiter. Our experience has been when you have trafficking occurring, it's usually with an unlicensed recruiter. Now in India, if you're to recruit foreign labor, the ministry dictates that you be a licensed recruiter. A number of things are necessary to become a licensed recruiter. You have to have a fixed office space. You have to produce 3 years of your tax returns. And you have to abide by certain rules and regulations concerning the recruitment, including the charging of commissions. After they identify the recruiter, either licensed or unlicensed, then what occurs is the layering effect. And this is not an uncommon occurrence in organized crime. What do you want to do if you're organized crime? You want to distance yourself from the conduct. Now, the conduct, in this instance, occurs with the person who's actually talking to the prospective worker. So they'll hire agents, they'll hire sub-agents to do this. And the reason they like to use unlicensed recruiters is there's no fixed address. And Sindhu will talk a little bit about the recruiting process, how this occurs in some of the remote areas. But first I want to talk a little bit about the profile of an ideal victim. Ideally, what they do is they will seek out small fishing or farming villages in remote locations. And as we were explaining to the U.S. Congress this last fall, this is the first indicator that there's some type of fraud going on. India is a country over 1.2 billion people, most of it agricultural. The UN says that 80% of the population lives off less than $1 a day. So do you really think that you couldn't go to Chennai and put an advertisement in the paper that you're going to pay someone $500 a month to work in the Gulf and you would have a lack of applicants? No. No. Yet the recruiters who do the trafficking don't engage in that practice. Why? Because there's a paper trail. Because then there's some notice that you were recruiting people. Someone can identify who was there. You know, it leaves a paper trail. So they use this, what I call an onion skin effect, to layer the agents and the sub-agents between recruiter and the worker, and they keep moving. I mean, I think we've only had one instance in all of the cases that Sindhu's investigated, which are scores of them, where there was an actual recruiting office that was even rented temporarily. Usually it's somebody just walks up in the village. Give me your passports, I'll get you a job. Guys do it. Most of them don't even know, isn't that right? Very few even know their name.
Just if who's asking for the passport, it's somebody's uncle's uncle or a brother's brother or something. It's like there's no name or address or a face there, but they're keen to go out and work. It attracts, and a big dollar always shines better than the details. So
I think that's right. The other key characteristic of the ideal victim is, and this is one of the reasons we believe that they go to the small fishing and farming villages, they charge recruiting fees or commissions. And of course, India has limitations on how much you can charge for unskilled, semi-skilled labor.
1 month's salary, that's a limitation.
Yeah, that's
according
right.
to the law.
That's right. So they have these limitations on the recruitment fees, but the recruiting company or the agent will charge anywhere between $2,500 and $5,000 US dollars per person in order to get them a job. And we believe that the reason they go to the small villages is because they know that the people won't have this money. That's a very important variable for the trafficker. Why is it important? You don't want them to have the money because oftentimes these men are not even told that they're going to, in our case, Iraq or Afghanistan. As we're sharing earlier, there have been several 100,000 men from the Indian subcontinent who have worked in Iraq and Afghanistan in support of what are called base support operations, doing the food services, the laundry services, the maintenance, the cleaning. And it's big money. You start adding up several 100,000 men, perhaps 400,000 or 500,000 men, times $2,500 to $5,000 a person. It's big business. Hundreds of millions of dollars in commissions flow through this process. But you don't want them to be able to pay it in cash, because oftentimes they find out they're in Iraq or Afghanistan only when they get off the plane. And we've interviewed several of them as they've come back here. And I asked one young man last August, I said, when you thought you were going to Jordan, you got off the plane in Iraq, why didn't you just leave? Well, usually in the Gulf, they retain the passports, which is also illegal. But he said, I was given my passport back because it was on U.S. contract, but I couldn't go back because I paid the commission. And I had to go to Loan Shark to do it. And we think that's why they like to go to the small villages.
Where they keep the house or jewelry, whatever they have is collateral, and they already is being handed out to who, what in America they call loan sharks, here we call who were the money lenders, or any name we can call them. So once it's been handed, there's no way you can just go, no, I couldn't make money, give it back. So, and that's what Sam is trying to say, is like they go to this place where there's no money with these guys, but they know they will be borrowing because they need job desperately. So they have this emotional hold on them. It's even the passport, they can always escape somehow or get a passport back, but to make them work without any papers, but according to the law, you have to give the passport to them, but still to make them stand there and work for that 2 years, whatever the contract it is the emotional thing, and they've been very successful till this day.
And they do, and if you don't pay that fee on a regular basis, then the loan shark forecloses on your parents' home, because most of these are young men, and usually they'll convince their parents to go ahead and use the house as collateral with the village loan shark. And so when they get over there, they find out two things. One, they're in a combat zone. And then by the time they start working, they usually find out that they're making half of what they were promised. If they were promised 600, they're making 300. If they were promised 800, they're going to make 400. And we also believe that this is done very strategically, because you have to induce someone to part with $2,500 or $5,000. How are you going to do that? You're going to do that because you know they're going to make a cost-benefit analysis. And you tell them they're going to make $800 or $1,000 a month, so they think, okay,
Just
even with
50
the
months, I can deal with that.
with the interest rate, 35, 45%, okay, it'll take me 6 or 9 months to pay this off. But what happens when they find they're making half that amount of money, that monthly payment that's due the loan shark doesn't change. And so all they're able to do is service the interest on the loan oftentimes and have a very small remittance that they can send back home. And that makes a worker very malleable to whatever the subcontractor wants to do. Because we oftentimes think of slaves being beaten, and sometimes that does happen in modern day slavery as well. But there's a reason that the United Nations and other countries say it's not just physical restraint, but financial circumstances that can cause restraint, that can constitute modern day slavery. Because that's just as real. For these guys who know that they would have to come home and face a loan shark, if they can't make those payments, they're not going to come home. And in fact, that's one of the things that the contractors threaten them with. If they say, but I was told I would make 800, you're only paying me 350. Okay, will I put you on the plane, go back home? That's the worst thing that can happen to them, because they still owe that $5,000. And that's one of the things that we're trying to explain to the members of Congress, that yes, they want to stay, but not because they wanted to be in a combat zone, making half the money they were told they would make, but because they know they have to. They don't have a choice. And also, we believe one of the reasons they go to the small villages is they're more naive regarding fraudulent recruiting processes. I think there's a lot more public awareness in places like Mumbai, Delhi, larger cities about what happens, and people are more skeptical. I mean, I've lived in Mumbai a couple of years. I got to say, I've developed a healthy skepticism now when representations are made to me. Yeah, it's like any big city, right? New York, Chicago, you're not going to be as trusting because there's a history there. So we believe that's why we did have the benefit, and I think this is where we're almost uniquely postured in this regard, Sindhu's interviewed several thousand men who have been defrauded and victims of labor trafficking, most of them in Iraq when she was on the ground there. We've also, however, had the benefit of interviewing a trafficker. There was a company that was very serious, a multinational company, serious about eradicating trafficking in persons, and so they took action. And we learned about this whole process as we went through our corporate investigations. We had a lady who told us that the head of the HR department was cheating her. So they referred it to us. It's like a compliance or ethics issue. Okay, how's he cheating you? And as many of you may know, in the Gulf, you can't just go set up a shop. You have to have someone who's there as 51% owner. Well, this Kuwaiti lady was a 51% owner of a company, a recruitment company. And the head of the company's HR department was the 49% owner. And she said, see, what he does is he goes to India, Nepal, Fiji, Kenya, and he enters into agreements with the recruiters to get 50% of whatever's charged the worker.
And I didn't get my share.
Yeah, and he's supposed to give me half of that, and he's been cheating me. So he said, oh, really? She said, yes. And so we validated it, went down to the ministry, saw that he did set up a company with her, and we filled out a complaint, had him put in jail. He was a little arrogant.
Why? Because the company gave the all the travel documents and the money, and to go from here to there and bring back, everything is paid to the recruiter.
Plus
the
a fee.
company is paying, and
Plus
a
a fee.
special fees until they start working. It's everything been given, but still, where does this share come? That's how when we investigated, we found that he's taking from the company the share which is supposed to be going to those guys and taking the money from them. And not only that, he was bring them here. There's a 3-month
Probation.
the probationary period. So he sent half of them back saying that they are not fit for work. So they already have taken money and given them, but they don't know who they given and all that. They go and again recruit, again they take the money. So he was going, this vicious circle was going, and he churned a lot of money from both from Nepal, India, and from the company. And that's how he ended up in jail. And so,
Well,
a few million.
fortunately, we
dollars.
weren't in jail. He was. But you're right, and that's how we learned about the scam, because there was one man from Pakistan, and he was complaining because he'd been terminated during his probationary period, he said, for no reason at all. And he was crying, and I said, listen, it's not that big of a deal. You'll go home, you'll get another job, you'll come back to the Gulf. And as he was crying, he said, you don't understand, I don't have a home. I said, you don't have a home? Why? He said, I had to sell it to pay
To
the
come here.
recruiter. And I said, the company pays the recruiter. He said, no, that's not what they say. They say we have to give them money because it pays for airfare and medicals and all this stuff, which was false. But anyway, that gave us some additional insight into how it worked. And then after about 3 weeks of being in a Kuwaiti jail, this head of HR, instead of being arrogant and proud, was actually on the floor crying and crawling and begging to tell us how this whole system worked, but tried to mitigate it by saying, it's not just me, it's everybody here. And you know what? I believe him. I believe him, because the next 3 people that replaced him we had to fire also for the same thing. Why? Because maybe you can make $45,000 or $50,000 a year, head of an HR department for a multinational company, or you can make several $million a year by trafficking in persons. And then your salary's just pen money. That's just a little bonus that you get in your mind. It's very, very lucrative when you think about
And the
getting
fun
there.
part of being an HR head, you can do this because he said that no labor can enter to the head office, so he can't complain. They are stopped. He can control the whole process. They are not entered anywhere of the offices. They can't talk to the manager or the supervisor That means, as we are talking about, the layer system works there too. So,
Yeah, it works not only for recruiting, but also within the company.
yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about the solicitation process, Sindhu?
I think we all, unfortunately, have accepted how to go to Gulf. We have to pay money. We don't think any other way. Like it's like company coming and taking us free. That's like, it would be a dream come true. But according to Middle Eastern companies also, according to our nation's law, 1 month's salary, yes, it is acceptable. But what we give, it's not 1 month. We go for like a 50,000 rupees or 30,000 rupees salary, but we pay 1 or 2 lakh even for a basic labor job. If it's for a higher work, then we are going to pay more. But again, I'm talking in the perspective of how in Iraq and Afghanistan and Kuwait, how the people have been recruited. And solicitation, as we all know, how they do go around looking for the guys who have only 10th or 12th standard certification, maybe even not that, or you can fake thing, and that's why they approach villages, because they know there's some high schools. And that's why most of the employees who are interviewed are from either from really remote of the northern region or really remote of the southern region. I even interviewed a goat herder from Himachal in Iraq, and he don't know to sit in a chair, and he was sitting down. I said, please sit on. He don't know. I said, how did you came to Iraq? And that to a catering company. And he said, my uncle's uncle, somebody's son built a house, and he went to Iraq and made that money. And I said, okay, so how did you manage, what were you doing there? I said, I had 265 goats, and me and my mother, we used to live on that. I said, so he sold that the goats, and sent the mama to some relatives, and he came here. So I said, did they interview, who did you give the money? A Babu. Who's this Babu? Babu. That's all he knows. The money he gave, the money he had given after selling that goat, I think it's 1.5 lakh rupees. And the Babu have an address or a name? No, just a Babu. And how did you end up? He said, I went to Delhi, and from there I came. Did anybody interview you? They asked. I said, what did they ask you? They said, do you cook? He said, yeah, I cook for my mother. Roti banati hu mama. That's what he said, and that's good enough. But where he was going to work was in a catering company where it's everything, the machine ran whole. It's not a kitchen, but it's like a whole industry running around there, feeding thousands of men there. And within a day, this person don't understand even if somebody can teach him what to do, he's not getting a word what they're talking about, and never seen, and he's so scared, and they want to send him back. And he was sent it back to me to make me understand. I had a hard time to understand his Hindi. He was speaking Hindi, but it was completely something which I never heard, only in the Doordarshan some long ago. He looked like that, and he was crying that I don't want to go back because I have no home, I have nothing, but somehow I will learn. And I asked the supervisor, is there any kind of job which he can? But he said, madam, first of all, his basic cleaning, or what we call the hygiene practices and everything. He said, we don't have that much time. This is like the things have to run. We don't have that much time to see. First of all, you have to learn the language and all that. So the thing is approaching the village, which I said the representation, they are targeting, all the thing is like take the money and they just disappear. And our guys here, it's really heartbreaking for me. Thousands and thousands of men who I talk to is all about that 10,000 rupees more or that 20,000 rupees more which they may get. And some do know they are coming to Iraq too. Somehow their word gets around, and some do know they are coming to Iraq, but they are ready to take the risk of the thing. And as we all are like family, we can do, as men here, we are ready to do anything to save our family concept, and men are crashing out of that. It's just as simple as that. And when they get there, they're accepting it. It's okay, you treat me badly, but somehow, even if you promised me this much, if you're going to promise me half, I'm okay. If you're going to give me food with worms, I'm okay with that too. But pay me something so I somehow solve the problem which is back there. But they don't have to. That's the thing. And at least definitely not in government contracts when they work over there, which is rules and regulations. That's why me and Sam, we've been working and bringing out, because this acceptance does not bring the problem up. Nobody's seen a light. Because as Sam began with, trafficking is, when we think about the women and children, prostitution, that's what it comes in mind. And men's problem, as I always say, as a woman, I still, since I've seen that part, men's problem is always so underrated. It's like, that's not an issue, and we blowed up the women's problem. It is a problem what the women have to, but still this is also, which is so terrible, because this man's money, which is helps his family. If this man can't help this woman back in the village, the woman trafficking also will grow, because as loan sharks, I know many stories where the women are taken to prostitution because the brother or the father couldn't pay back the money. So men's thing and money, the bigger amount, because prostitution, when we compare the money which goes through, in this is billions and billions of dollars are involved compared to the women's trafficking and children trafficking. But again, I think the media thing is, again, media plays a role on that. And that's what in this last 6 years, me and Sam been trying to bring out. There is a problem, men's issues. This is called labor trafficking. It's because it's not just in definition. There is it. And we have taken a video, we've been talking, and we'll be talking more about how happy we are. Things are slowly coming into light. And that's why we are happy to talk here too. And I've been trying to talk in India, and I did a lot of research on trafficking in India, and all it comes up, it's only about sex trafficking. And our men, thousands and thousands of men are treated like that. It's a bit more than emotional for me.
It is disturbing. It just reminds me of about 3 weeks ago, I was in the Pentagon because we're working some other initiatives here, trying to working with the White House, trying to bring the government agencies into line. As I was sharing this with one of the undersecretaries of defense, who I've known for some time, I explained to him the problem. And things that are common here are not that well understood back in America. When I explained the commission, he said, wait a minute, you're saying the worker has to pay a recruiter money to get a job? He said, that's like the reverse of what happens. And I said, no, that's exactly how it happens for men who want to go work in the Gulf. It's not as though they're doing anything different on U.S. government contracts. It's just they're doing it business as usual. He said, I just want to be sure I understand. You're saying the worker has to pay money to a recruiter for them to get a job for the privilege of working. I said, yeah, that's the way it works. He said, that's not right. And I said, no, it's not. We have laws against it. And that's one of the reasons we're also focusing on U.S. government contracts, because there are some pretty strict laws that prohibit excessive commissions, deceptive hiring practices to work on government contracts, and now they're starting to take action. And we'll share a couple of those stories about some of the benefits of that. But I know Sindhu has a lot of illustrations about victims, and I think they're important because oftentimes I overlook the victims and I'm focused on legal issues when I'm talking to people back in Washington, D.C., but it really is all about the victims. As you said, not just the men, but the families they support and the people who are dependent on them, the financial impact. And why don't we play that DVD? We're going to show you a DVD that was taken by a guy we know through a little pen camera. And he was an employee for the U.S. Department of State. He had been complaining about how this recruiting process makes men indentured servants. And he took a pen camera around to the camps and interviewed people without anyone knowing it. Made a DVD on this.
Inside U.S. military bases in Iraq, thousands of laborers work in a situation that is difficult to describe as anything other than debt bondage.
Oh, you guys are all Nepal? Yeah, Nepal. I'm in Nepal. Yeah. So how much did you guys pay for time? How much, when you came to Baghdad, how much you paid?
To get their jobs, these men paid labor brokers thousands of dollars up front. But because they're poor, they took high-interest loans to pay the brokers.
How much do the agent? 4,000. Yeah. In Nepal. Yeah. Okay. $4,000. Yeah. And you? 4,000. Yeah. How did you get $4,000? Really? You take a loan? Loan. What percentage? Show me on paper. This one.
This man took a $4,000 loan to get his job. Every month he pays $120 in interest. In 1 year he pays $1,440 in interest. That makes it a 36% interest loan.
Wow.
This is his pay stub. He works for a Dubai-based company called Prime Projects International, which in this case is a subcontractor to KBR. He works 12 hours per day, and even though the pay stub doesn't say it, he works at least 6 days per week. That means his hourly wage is less than $2. On this base, the food service is run by a KBR subcontractor called Gulf Catering. Gulf Catering is a Saudi Arabian company, but most of their employees in the dining facility are from South Asian countries. These men live in a company-run camp outside the base perimeter.
Is this for the guys who live? Is this for the guys who live? Oh yeah, Gulf Catering. So how many guys are living here?
No, maybe 1,000 more.
Wow, 1,000. That's a lot of guys. So in one trailer, how many guys are living?
One room, 12 each.
12?
30.
Oh, 12 guys in one room?
Yeah, 2 shifts. Day shift, night.
You're kidding.
No, 6 people, 7 people day, going. Night people, 6, 7 days. Next people.
I wasn't allowed inside the trailers to see how the men were living, so I took the camera to a different group of workers and they passed it to a Gulf Catering employee. His pictures show the space he shares with 11 other men. 6 sleep in the day and 6 sleep at night. Many of the men have been living like this for years.
I'm not trying to cause trouble. I don't know the rules. If there's a rule that he cannot leave, no problem. I was only curious. I thought, he's a friend of mine, I'll stop and ask, and that's all. You know? But I think maybe there's rules that he shouldn't leave, it seems. Is that correct?
Now we have rules, this all companies, we are DCC company. All vehicle coming, take the stop and go to other company.
I see.
That's why we have stopped the visitation.
Oh, really?
So we are running short of the staff now.
You're running short of people?
Short of the people are.
Oh, I see. Because they're going to other companies, eh?
No.
Okay.
The farthest I was led into the camp was the guardhouse.
Thank you so much. $4,000? You pay? You pay? I know it was there. I know. You pay $4,000? And you make $350 in 1 month?
Yeah.
The supervisor revealed another layer of the story.
We don't have, because we cannot enter Iraq. They are illegal now. We cannot be allowed to come to Iraq. Indian law, we cannot enter India, Sri Lanka, Nepal. It's a war zone. We are not allowed to come India. We are coming in Dubai for visiting visa. And with Dubai, we are coming here illegal. That's why we are able to get anything.
How do you get from Dubai here?
Right, charter flight.
Airplane.
Yeah, exactly. It's from
But no passport. But they don't take your passport and no passport?
passport here.
This is a document from the U.S. State Department website with guidelines to define human smuggling and human trafficking. Case study number 2 reads, a recruiting agency in India was looking for welders to work at a company in the United States for $10 an hour. The agency charged each prospective worker a non-refundable $2,500 application fee. En route to the United States, the workers were given contracts to sign. The contracts obligated the workers to work for the next 6 months for less than $3 an hour. They were told to sign the contracts or they would be sent back home. The workers felt that they could not back out because they'd invested all of their savings and were already on their way to the United States. Once they arrived, they were confined to the factory grounds, and the owner of the company kept their passports. Were the workers smuggled or trafficked? The workers were victims of severe forms of trafficking in persons. The workers were transported for the purposes of labor through the use of fraud and coercion, which resulted in the workers being subjected to involuntary servitude. Confiscation of the workers' passports by the employer also caused the workers to believe that they were forced to stay with the company. During the 21 months that I was in Iraq, I spoke to dozens of these laborers, and none had been forced to surrender their passports. However, none of the men I spoke to had copies of their contracts, nor had they ever read their contracts in their native language. All of them had paid large fees to labor brokers, and some believed that they were brought into Iraq illegally. In addition, none of the men I spoke to had ever been told about the Defense Base Act. The Defense Base Act is a decades-old provision that provides compensation for disability or death to people employed on U.S. military bases outside the United States. While all of the workers I spoke to were entitled to these insurance benefits, none of the men I spoke to were aware of it, though they were working in a place that was inherently dangerous.
I've never seen that before.
The companies using these laborers are not limited to just a few Middle Eastern subcontractors. Dozens of companies are using their services, including some very familiar names.
Hey guys. Hey, how much did you guys told me the other night, you said you made $400 a month? Good God, man. But you work 12 hours a day? 7 days a week or 6 days?
No more 12.
You have 1 day off? So it's 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. Wow. Did you have to pay money to get here? Okay. $5,000 to get here, and you make $1.50 an hour. Gotcha. Okay.
In 2006, the Chicago Tribune reported on orders issued from General George Casey's office that addressed the rule of law inside U.S. military bases in Iraq. Quote, "The memos say the military also confirmed a host of other abuses during an inspection of contracting activities supporting the U.S. military in Iraq. They include deceptive hiring practices, excessive fees charged by overseas job brokers who lure workers into Iraq, substandard living conditions once laborers arrive, violations of Iraqi immigration laws, and a lack of mandatory awareness training on U.S. bases concerning human trafficking. Under future contracts, Casey is requiring that all firms, no matter how far down the chain, provide workers with a signed copy of their employment contract that defines the terms of their employment. He's ordering that contracts include measurable, enforceable standards for living conditions and establish 50 feet as the minimum acceptable square footage of personal living space per worker. Contractors and subcontractors also must comply with international laws regarding transit, exit, and entry procedures, requirements for work visas, and Iraqi immigration laws. The orders also mandate that future contracts and subcontracts include language that prohibits contractors and subcontractors at all tiers from utilizing unlicensed recruiting firms or firms that charge illegal recruiting fees. This report was published in the spring of 2006. Production on this film started 3 years later in the spring of 2009.
One of the things I like about Sai's short documentary is it highlights the impact that it has on these individuals. We've shown this up on Capitol Hill, our Congress, to a number of people, which has somewhat inflamed a number of members. We have a couple of bills out there right now that would basically make it a statute, everything that General Casey said in his, what was called the fragmentation order. What we saw on here can't really hold a candle to some of the man cabs that we've seen footage on in UAE. Al Jazeera did a very interesting segment on labor trafficking and showed the conditions some of those men live in. But what we found is if someone takes an interest and tries to hold someone accountable, that there can be change. And we'll talk about one of the success stories, at least that affected about 17,500 men when we conclude this. Hey, you have anything more, Sindhu, about the victims? I think that you have some instances. You talked a little bit about forced prostitution to satisfy debts, but I know you've also had a couple instances where men have killed themselves and their families, I think, right?
Yes, there's so many stories. I don't know which one to start, but I went back. First time I went to Iraq, I did talk to men, and they all became very friendly. And next time when I went, I saw one guy and asked him, like, where's your friend who I talked to before? He said, he's no more, ma'am. I said, what happened? He said he went for, they sent him back home, and he couldn't pay back all this thing. And the head of the village, who's also a moneylender, he took one of his sister, and it's a shame, and the whole family hanged, his mother and 2 sisters. And that's one story. And another thing, again, one guy was sent back home, and this was like actually in January. I went to Madurai to talk to the guys who returned, and one of the guy's parents being kicked out because the son couldn't pay back, and this fellow went and hanged in one of the tree. And now the parents are living in the tin shed in between the farm, which is just terrible sight to see. And this is just few. It's like worst stories, and more things are hushed down. Nobody is knowing about it. That's my biggest issue. It's like, because even men think it's a weakness. It's a shame to talk about that. And some are accusing them because it's of your greed you're going there. You could work here, you could find a job here, why you could do a farming and all that. So it's really have to push them to talk about what's the problem, and that's my experience.
Yeah, I think that's right. And one of the things that is a fact is Kerala has the highest suicide rate in India. The other thing we know is most of the laborers that go to the Gulf come from Kerala and Tamil Nadu. What we don't know is there a correlation between this pervasive, deceptive hiring that results in indentured servitude and coming back and then committing suicide, because you're indebted far beyond your imagination to ever repay. That we don't know. We also know the impact on the recruiters, though, and the people who enjoy the kickbacks that they get from the recruiters. Very, very wealthy, multi-millionaires. We were investigating one fellow in, I think in Tamil Nadu, and had property in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, right?
In Tamil Nadu, actually, 3
yeah.
bungalows.
Only made $50,000 a year on his job in Iraq, yet he had multi-million-dollar estates.
He went as a labor there, and then somehow he was in good books of the supervisor. Then he became a supervisor and was given in charge on the recruitment. And now he owned 3 bungalows in the main city of Chennai. And how? He's still a supervisor getting that salary, but he owns 3 bungalows. And his wife's brother or somebody who's running the recruitment, and I did track him down to the recruitment office, but by the time I could get there, it was not a real office. It's been like clean, and I asked the neighbor coffee shop person. There was only a money counting machine, and collected a big lot of passport. That's all they had in their office. So that's how that's what I think we'll be looking in the next site, how they can conceal it so well.
Well, I think it's easily concealed also. We talked about that a little bit, because, I mean, unlike drugs or illegal arms, there's nothing suspicious, inherently suspicious, about seeing 25, 30 people in a line in the Dubai airport, sitting there for days and days and days.
Even in our Mumbai airport, if you go and see, you can see, if you see a group of men just with a plastic bag in their hand, looking really tired and sad, they are the one who are going to be laborers in somewhere in the Middle East. And they were waiting outside in the airport until this recruiter will be having one guy who's working in the customs office who will not ask more questions where they're going. All they will be having a visit visa to Dubai, or visiting an uncle or aunt who's in Dubai or wherever it is. Because from there, where they are going, no one knows. And when you go, if you happen to pass by in Dubai airport, you can see so many Indian men sleeping, just drinking water from the pipe and sleeping on all over the airport. They're waiting for this unknown person who will come looking for them to take them in the charter flight. And once they get there, again, you can't ask for where is Ramesh or where is Suresh, because they don't record the name or anybody. So that's why we don't know how many are being killed or how many are back home. No address. If he come back home, or if the money is coming in time to the bank, it's a sign that he's alive there and is working. Otherwise, you can't track them down. And it's even today, still you can see men are going there. And unfortunately, some of them who came back still wanted to go back thinking something would have changed. And I don't know how to deal with that. I'm still thinking how to make them understand.
I think it's like gambling, though. If you lose a lot of money at the crap tables, what's your only hope? You think, I've got to get lucky sometime. I'm going to keep throwing the dice until everything plus some is gone. One of the things we said is the questions asked on the title to this is not only labor trafficking, how it occurs, which we've been talking about the process, but also why it flourishes. Sindhu talked about one reason: it's easily concealed. And we've not found a single case where anyone was ever prosecuted for labor trafficking, ever. I just don't think it exists. But probably one of the main reasons that it flourishes in the Gulf, in spite of laws to the contrary, because even in Kuwait, it's illegal to keep passports. Most people don't realize that, but the sponsor has to give the passport to the worker. Most people think the opposite is true. And I remember we, in the company, we put out a message after General Casey's order. It said everyone has to get their passports back. And I was on the board of directors, and one of the other members of the board of directors, Kuwaiti gentleman, said, "Sam, you better check. I think that the sponsors are required by law to keep the passports." So I got a legal opinion from the local law firm. They said, no, it's just the opposite. You're prohibited from keeping passports, but because everyone does it, it's the practice. But when we sent out the message that everyone had to have their passports retained so their travel wouldn't be restricted. Because if you're free to leave, it makes it less likely you're a slave. That's one of the indicia of being a slave. You're not free to leave. And at that time, the head of HR, a different person, a Lebanese lady, she didn't do it. And so I wrote a message back. I said, I thought that all the passports were given back 2 months ago pursuant to this order. She shot back a message, "You don't understand our culture, Sam. If we give them their passports back, they'll run away." And I said, that's why you have to give them back, so they can run away if they want to. You know? So there are some cultural difference, you know, the destination country culture. One of the things I like to highlight when I talk about the culture in the Gulf is you also have to understand that chattel slavery, the ability to go down to the souk and purchase a camel, a goat, and a person and own all three, has only been legally abolished in my lifetime. The U.S. had legal slavery up until 1862, Emancipation Proclamation, and then it continued on until 1865, until after the Civil War. But in the Gulf region, as late as the 1960s, 1964, chattel slavery was still legal. I think we all know it still goes on, where people buy people, keep them in their compounds. And as we were discussing earlier, talk to some of the folks. And this is customary of what you saw in the deep south in the United States, the way they felt about slavery, is the way that many people there feel about slavery today. I'm giving them food, I'm giving them clothes, and a place to stay. They should be happy with that. Now they're wanting me to pay them too? How ungrateful can you be? So there is some cultural difference here. Also, a lack of identification with the victims. This is true anywhere. One of the problems we have is trying to get the American people to identify with victims that are 10,000 miles away that they've never seen, and a practice that they're unfamiliar with. But anyway, that is one of the reasons it flourishes, a lack of people who identify with the victims. And also the perception in the Gulf oftentimes that you're not purchasing the services of a person, you're buying the person. The belief that if I pay a labor broker $2,500 or $3,000, I'm not just paying for services 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I bought that person. They're mine until that contract's over, to do with as I please. And as long as that continues, it's going to be hard to imagine the process will be. But also, I've already talked about the lucrative nature of the process. Not only the recruiter, but the kickback the contractor gets, which is typically 50% of whatever is recovered from the worker. Cindy, you want to talk about mitigation measures a little bit?
Well, When I started about mitigation, I was from the beginning. First thing when I saw what happened for my countrymen, that's what they used to say. You're so worried about your countrymen, but it's not only my countrymen. It's generally what we see. It's definitely very disturbing. And when I saw what being done here, majorly 99% is done on sex trafficking, and I don't know where we are at that, but maybe there are small changes, but none for the labor trafficking. But there are, again, when I saw some kind of awareness, which include a little bit of labor trafficking, was for the domestic workers, especially the women who are hired for, then again, it's focused on women domestic labors, not for men, or there's no, and even in that awareness, they didn't say the 1 month you can pay, anything more than that you should approach, and all that, where you're supposed to call if anybody is recruiting without the license and all. Nobody know about that. They never heard of it. And I think the awareness is in the cities, but that's why they're targeting on villages, and I don't know, I can't tell anything but that's why we are still working on it, how instead of just on the paperwork program, some practical programs which we can, and I'm from this side, I know it's not fair to say from our countryside still that attitude towards men's, because we have to take care of women and children problem first, then we'll come to men. That's what some have this thing. So I'm trying from the US side at least to help on the men they are hiring for their companies. So starting from a smaller area so that we can't just change the whole thing. So
I think a paternalistic attitude is probably prevalent in most countries in the world. In the U.S., we found that too. If there was an author we know, Sarah Stillman, who wrote a piece in the New Yorker about the trafficking process. Most of it related to, most of the process is, about women. There were about maybe 8 or 10 women who were from Fiji that were trafficked to work on the beauty salons there, and were only making half of what, or a fraction actually, of what they were told. But she said, but all these other people I mentioned, the food service workers, there are tens of thousands of them. She said, but nobody cares about that. She said, people have said that's terrible, but what happened to those women? And so there is something to overcome. Also, in the same vein, we believe training law enforcement agents. We started doing that in the United States. The U.S. law enforcement agents were on the ground in Afghanistan, training them about what labor trafficking is, how to identify it and assess it, build a case. And also we started working actually in one of the Gulf countries, training their federal law enforcement officers. One of the countries that's very much engaged to do something about preventing labor trafficking into their country. And then also we're trying to do it on the supply side too. We're hoping to work with a couple NGOs we've contacted over here, and a fellow I met in Delhi when I spoke at a conference a few weeks ago on community policing, who's the head of the National Law Enforcement Training Center. Hopefully try to link up with him and engage in some conduct that creates an awareness about the impact this has. I think a lot of us see other crimes as being more severe, and they are, but what happens here is whole families are placed in debt for the rest of their lives.
and more we are talking about global, and more men traveling have become so easy, going and working in different countries have become a common thing. So this practice, I think it's time at least from now, the awareness has to be done so that we just don't become just a slave labor destination country. I think that's awareness, and that's one of the reasons why we are here too. The awareness is part of awareness. Is there any more, you guys, because as an observer you have more outreach, so you can take and run longer way than as we two individuals been trying to do. So.
I explained to a few folks before we came that we testified before the U.S. Congress last November, and the chairman of that committee was outraged that this process is going on, and that the U.S. government agencies, Department of Defense, Department of State, are not doing anything to stop it on our own contracts. And to paraphrase him, he said, we can't always affect everything that other people might do, but this is totally contrary to our ideals, to our belief system, and our values, that people can exploit their fellow man like this. And this is not what we're all about. And I think it's just this kind of silent thing that simmers below the surface in all the countries. This origin, the source, and the destination countries. Nobody really wants to talk about it much. But unless we talk about it, nothing will happen. And I think that we had 1 hour, and I think that's just about it. It concludes our remarks, but I hope we'll have a dialogue and answer any questions, if we can, that you might have. Either about the process or results of our investigations and inquiries in this area.
You're doing very good work. God bless you. I hope you are successful.
Oh, thank you, sir. I
Thank you
should
so
point out
much.
that we have had a little bit of success. One of the things we've been doing is, through Congress, is putting pressure on the U.S. companies that are the prime contractors in the Gulf to have better oversight of their subcontractors. One of those prime contractors has now told Congress and validated that they've already hired directly 17,500 workers, most of them from the Indian subcontinent. And Sindhu has talked to one of the men that we interviewed last August, and he called her as recently as today. He said, "This is great. I didn't have to pay a commission."
And they gave me what they promised from here. That's a new thing for him and that's, it's encouraging for us that some people wanted, because once you bring them into light, nobody wants to look bad, isn't it? So I think that's what we are trying to do.
We-
Bless you all.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Appreciate it.
May I also share some thoughts on this subject?
Yes,
sir?
Yeah,
Please do.
please do, please.
I feel deeply moved by your I feel deeply moved by your presentation. And I have been thinking about this matter. I am over 70 now, but I've been thinking about this matter 50 years ago when I was looking for employment. And there used to be people around who were cheated like that. We may not use the word cheated, but all these things are involved. They take money from the employer, they take money from the recruited person, so both the recruiter and recruited pay them. And I used to wonder one thing which you should note down in your mind and later on act on it. Why is it that the political representatives of the area where these people live in do not act on their behalf? Here, in the city where the transaction takes place, where the contract takes place, their villages, and the place where they go to. For the last 50 years, I've seen that nothing takes place. And you know, there are 3 organizations involved in this. There are 3 organized powers. There are more organized powers. This also you should note. One is the organized state power, which not only comprises the elected representatives, the politicians, but also the administrators. And the police too, who investigate and know this. The second is the organized religious power. You will know that these people who are cheated in every village, even the ones who return, they have a temple or a church in the locality with organizations. And they know everything that is happening, all the evil and devilishness which is happening. And I am talking only of 50 years because I am talking about my life and my personal experiences of what I am observing as a social activist. I am also a lawyer. I don't practice now. These organized religious powers, the priest powers who pretend that they are talking about morality but make these people endure immense suffering. And the police and the administrators and the politicians, the people whom you report to, and then only things will change in the country. You know that people in the villages have 5-6 children because their priests tell them produce more so that your religious flocks will be larger in number. So what happens? What is the use of talking if we don't act on this? I stated the question. This is what my question is. But I will stop if you don't like what I'm saying. I don't mind at all. I'm come here to share and change the world. But if you like, I will stop. I don't mind at all.
No, you make a good point, sir, because...
Yeah, my point is that you convey what I have said, and I have much more to say, but I will stop here, to the authorities, US government, Indian government, and the other intermediaries. That is my point, and that is my question. And how you will do it. That is my question.
Yeah, you're right, because all that you mentioned are aware of what's going on, but nobody's really acted. And I can say on behalf of myself and Sindhu, everything that we've done, with the exception of the investigations that we do for companies, all the stuff that we're doing is all pro bono for the public good. But we're driven by our faith, that we believe it's wrong, inherently wrong, to treat our fellow man in this manner.
And all men are created equal. It doesn't matter what color, creed, and I think that's a basic thing which we are motivated
Yes.
to.
Yes.
Doesn't include in any religion.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I mean, madam and the gentleman, my name is Ratanlal Purohit. I am a consumer activist. As everybody said, they are moved. I am moved also. But I am still here thinking about it. You gave one answer, the direct recruitment. That's a very, very fair way to handle the problem. Involving government agencies, already there are government agencies that are telling everybody to do in Doordarshan and I mean TV and all that they should go to the official recruitment. But I don't understand one simple thing. As you rightly say, why should you pay? You want the job because you want the money. So you give the money. I mean, is it just like they are pimps or what is? I can't understand this. This is something which is, I mean, who requires? Now this person requires money. That's why he is trying to sacrifice because he has got no other way to do it.
Yes.
How to stop this? Because you have got now, we have got Narega, we give employment to them, we give so many other things. You want them somewhere to work for Iraq or wherever you want them to work. Why don't you do it directly through media, directly to tell them that here is an agency and you can go to them so that unscrupulous intermediaries who are taking them, sometimes the ship loads go I mean, you may be hearing from Punjab, there's a lot of persons who go, they are promised and then they sink in the sea or they are thrown away by those countries, etc. This is happening because of poverty. So the main thing is the poverty, the root cause is the poverty. And poverty alleviation is the only way that you can handle this with the Narega. Doesn't solve each of their problem. So if you want to help them, as Mr. Joseph was trying to tell you, that why don't you do it directly by media? He was talking about something. Is upset without the media's doing wrong things, but then the televisions, etc., you can send a message to the persons concerned that here are the so many jobs, and it can be regulated through government agencies.
We do think that, thank you for that comment, we do think that that is the key, is a targeted media effort where the workers come from. And a targeted media effort that talks about the process in just a few seconds and how you have to beware from being exploited. We know that down in Kerala, we've seen commercials and ads for domestic workers, warning them what could happen to them if they go to the Gulf. But there's not really anything that, to my knowledge, has been targeted toward laborers to warn them about the deceptive hiring and the consequences.
And the other thing, as you were saying, what we can do is, Sam won't be saying I can tell on his behalf, is like what he told me is, before we go out and tell other countries what you're doing is wrong, you have to do this and that, let me start fix the problem in my country. And it's so hypocritical for me to go out and say, that's what he told me. And that's exactly what we're doing. And it is going places, as we're telling, we're talking in Congress. Let's fix it there. So because Congress, they are all the UN and all the paper going out saying, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And I really admire him for that. And I think he wrote an report and submitted to Obama's administration. Let's see how that comes out, like what we can do and what the company should directly recruit, and how, if you come and recruit, how we can support them and all that thing. We are working on it, and it's very positive things, the way the paper is moving faster than in India. I'm so excited about it. He's so frustrated because it took a year. I said, no, it takes my lifetime. It's only a year. I can wait. And that's what I told him.
Well,
so that's a good thing happening.
Please remember that we support you in all this.
Thank
but
you so
of course,
much.
we can only support you in prayer. What
Yes.
else we can do? We are powerless.
That's a lot. But you know, what Sindhu mentioned reminds me of a conference that we spoke at in 2007 in Washington, D.C. And the conference the title was How U.S. Government Contractors Can Mitigate Trafficking of Persons on Their Contracts Overseas. and people were getting up and talking about different measures. One of the large contractors said, we hire subcontractors, we don't hire labor, so it's not our business. And we told what we were doing for this company, and one of the journalists in the audience said, we understand that this practice has been going on in the Gulf region for maybe hundreds of years. Do you really think you're going to change the culture in the Gulf? And I responded to him, I said, you know, we're not trying to change the culture in the Gulf region. What we're trying to do is create a subculture of compliance, company by company, that says it doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen here.
And we've been successful on that. A company which have 50,000 employees, they are following it, and I've been one of the employees once upon a time there, and we can make a difference company by company, and eventually maybe the
How
culture.
have you been successful in India? You are successful in US, but what about
That's what I told before. It's not getting anywhere here, so I'm coming from the side wind from US. I have no choice because as I was telling, like only, even here today, we have few occurred who think and concern wanted to do something about it. And there are a bigger group who, so yeah, I'm pathetically positive on this and hopefully we will get there one day. Yeah, we will change.
Yes, sir, I think another question, or
That's it.
any other questions or comments? Oh, in the back.
We can give our email address or anything. Even if you don't want to talk here, you can always write back or call us.
If you want to, we'll also send you a link to the congressional hearing where we testified, and also an article we wrote on how to investigate this and
Yeah,
prosecute
we can
it.
send that to you guys, and we can see how we are moving ahead.
Well, I thank you for your attention, gentlemen.